Hi, everyone, and welcome to Seek and Find Life's Fundamental Concepts series. Today, we're going to be going over the needs framework, and this is probably going to be one of a little mini group of episodes on the needs framework because this is number one, very fundamental, and then number two, it's somewhat of a large topic. And so this will just be the first video to give kind of an introduction to the needs framework. So the first question you probably have is, what is the needs framework? And number one, it's a framework for understanding the human experience. And it's called the needs framework because it's based on the idea that the entire human experience is based on universal human needs, right? So everything that you're thinking, everything that you're feeling, every behavior that you're taking, everything you say is actually based on underlying universal human needs. And when I had first gotten into this, honestly, I kind of had my mind blown a little bit that this is the case. And I had tried to understand a lot of things. I mean, one of the things that we go over in the mental health and relationship series with habit formation is how come when I want to go to the beach, I go to the beach. When I want to go out to lunch with my friends, I go out to lunch with my friends. But suddenly when I want to do my homework or when I want to go to the gym, there's something within me that's kind of resisting that. That's like, no, I don't want to. And I'm like trying to push against it or something. I'm like, but I want to go to the gym. Like I'm in charge. This is what I want to do. But then somehow like within me, there's like a no, I don't. And I just was really confused. It's like, hey, why is this happening? And when this framework was presented to me and I began to start to understand these things, it cleared up a lot of things. And I really realized, wow, not only is this helping me just understand myself better, but this is a great way for us to be able to help people and improve their lives and live kind of like happy, living, loving, giving lives. And so that brings me to our next point, which is why do we focus so much on needs in the Seek and Find Life program? It's probably the number one thing that we focus on. Is we believe that when needs are fulfilled, people are naturally happy, loving, and giving, right? And a lot of times we've been focused on like, hey, how do we work on a certain behavior? How do we work on a certain behavior pattern? Thinking pattern. And a lot of times, honestly, the base of it is like, how do I fix someone or how do I fix something, right? Like, how do I fix my behavior? How do I fix my thinking? How do I fix my feelings, right? And it was a big kind of revelation to me to realize, hey, that's not really what's going on here. What's going on here is this person is starved of their needs. They're having unfulfilled or unmet needs. And so they're kind of running on empty. And then because there's unfulfilled needs, a lot of what I would call adverse or maybe unproductive behaviors, unproductive thinking patterns result out of that. And so when you're looking at like, hey, why do people do things that hurt other people? Hey, why are people communicating in a way that's so harsh to other people? This kind of thing. Instead of trying to fix their behavior or fix there's something wrong with them and we need to fix it, it really helped me to realize, hey, these people are running on empty, right? They're starved for their needs and they feel like their only way to survive, to get by, is to try and grab their needs from other places or other people. And so then it's resulting in a lot of really like weird, counterproductive, not so helpful behavior and thinking patterns. But if we help them to fulfill their needs, then just naturally they just become happy, loving, giving people. And so that's why we're really focused in this program about helping people to fulfill their needs, because we believe nobody needs to be fixed. There's nothing wrong with anybody. But when people are deprived of their needs, they tend to behave and think in not so great ways, not so productive ways. And when they have their needs met, actually just things naturally become easy. They naturally become happy, loving, giving. And then you don't need to fix anything. There's nothing to fix in the first place. And so anyways, this has been a really big help for me and my own journey learning about this. And then we just wanted to continue to try and share this with other people and help them get their needs met. And so along that line, I actually thought it might be a good time to explain what our goals for the entire Seek and Find Life program are, just because it makes sense along with this topic. And so just to mention, these are two goals for the entire Seek and Find Life program. Whether you're in our habits and participants program, whether you're or we're thinking about these YouTube videos, these are really our goals for every single person that comes into contact with Seek and Find Life, which is number one, to help them bring needs into awareness. One of the big things is that we're just not aware that we have certain needs that are not being fulfilled, and because we're not aware, of course, it's really hard to meet them, right? And then the second thing is once we're aware that we have needs that are not getting met, than to empower people to fulfill their needs, to give them the tools that they need so that they can have their needs met on a regular basis. And we believe that this just naturally results in happy, loving, giving people. And that's really our goal here, is that everybody is living a happy, loving, giving life. And when their needs are met, that happens. And so really our whole goal with everything that we do here at Seek and Find Life is based on helping people to be aware of their needs and then fulfill their needs. And with that, I think we can come to the needs framework chart. And so this is a chart that we're going to come back to again and again and again. And we're going to add more complexity on it. We're going to add depth to it. There's going to be a more complicated version of this chart that I'll show you very briefly just to scare you. And then when we see it, then we'll take it away and come back to the simple version. And just today, we're going to go through kind of the basics here of the needs framework. And the idea here is that everything that we're feeling, everything that we're thinking, everything that we're doing, that all of our behavior is based on underlying needs. And throughout this series, and honestly in Seek and Find Life, I think it's been helpful to relate our needs to our physical needs. And the reason for that is because a lot of times the way that we conceive of and treat our physical needs is actually very different than the way that we treat other needs, such as emotional needs. And so I think it just becomes a very good way for us to start to understand this process, how this works, and then start to apply it to other areas of our life that are not physical, right? So I'll do this with a simple example of hunger, and then we'll go on to kind of like an emotional example. And then I think that's probably good enough for today, just to get a basic idea of how this works. So as you can see here, it starts on the left with a need. And then next we have a feeling, right? Or feelings. And next we have thoughts. And next we have behaviors. And a lot of times this becomes so kind of automatic to us that we don't even realize this is happening. This is just something that just happens every day, and I don't even think about it anymore. And so it's really helpful for us to kind of take a step back and look at, hey, what is actually happening here? And then think about how sometimes things might get what I would call disconnected. In other words, we end up getting to the end here, we get to behavior, but we're taking a behavior that's actually not fulfilling our needs. And then that can end up in certain things that are just not that productive, right? And so what we'll start with as an example is hunger. So this is something that I think we're all familiar with. And your body, as you're going about your day, you're doing different things, is using up energy, and it's also using food to rebuild parts of itself, to supply its cells, all these kinds of things, right? So something that's always happening is that your body is using up food. But it would be really hard, or at least I think it would be really hard, if I had to know when to eat food all the time, right? And so your body has this wonderful thing where it lets you know, right? It says, hey, I need some food. I'm hungry, right? Or you're hungry, or however you want to phrase it, right? The body's letting you know that you need food. And this is a feeling that we call hunger. And so I want to mention that there's actually two things going on here, right? And kind of separate those for a second, because they're connected, but I want to disconnect them so that we can look at them separately. Is number one, there's kind of like a physical fact that your body is both using food and needs more, right? And that's something that you are not consciously aware of, right? I'm not consciously aware that my stomach is, digesting food. I'm not consciously aware that my intestines are absorbing food. It's just a thing that happens kind of in the background for me as I'm going about my day, right? Then there's a second thing that happens, which is there's a feeling, right? And this feeling is called hunger. And so we have this feeling, this sensation within us that lets us know that our body needs food. And it happens to be that these two things are connected. In other words, as my body needs food, then I get this sensation called hunger. And if I don't eat for a period of time, then that sensation is going to get stronger because it's representing that need is getting more urgent, right? And so my body's letting me know. And so typically, even when I ask people, how would you explain hunger to a 2-year-old, right? Let's say, a 2-year-old comes to you and they don't know what hunger feels like. And so they go, what does hunger feel like? How do I know if I'm feeling hungry? And most of the time when I talk to people, and I include myself, is I have a really hard time actually explaining what it is. I just kind of know somehow. In fact, probably the part that I'm aware of is thoughts, right? I just somehow, like, I can't really exactly describe the feeling of hunger, but I know what it is. And when it happens, I tend to have this thought, oh, I should get some food, right? Or maybe if I'm like driving around in my car or something, then like every restaurant I see, I'm like, oh man, that looks good, or oh man, that looks good, right? So I just realize like, oh dude, I must be hungry. That must be what's going on here. And so number one, my body had a need, right? My body needed food. Number two, that manifested itself. It made me aware of that through a feeling called hunger, right? And then those feelings generated a bunch of thoughts, right? Like, oh man, a burger would be really great right now, or like, oh man, that looks like a really great place to get a sandwich or a salad or whatever it is, right? And so now I'm having these thoughts, and then typically I go ahead and I take a behavior, right? I make a choice, and I go to a restaurant, or I go cook some food, or I grab something from the fridge, or whatever it is. And so you can see here in a very simple way, there was a need. And again, I'm not aware of the need itself, right? It just happens. But then I become aware through a feeling. So a feeling is actually indicating that I have a need, right? That silent need that I can't detect myself, that is kind of in the background, is made known to me through a feeling. So the feeling is letting me know I have a need. And then that feeling, hunger, is generating some thoughts. And it's kind of like a very subtle thing. It's not like, hey, David, you need to eat right now, right? It's more just like, oh, I just start noticing food, or I just start thinking about food. Like I was working on something and I just start thinking like, oh man, like I should get food or something. Like, where did that come from, right? Is like, actually, it probably came from a feeling of hunger, that even a feeling I was only like very subtly aware of, but I was much more aware of the thoughts, right? That's where it became much more conscious to me. And then when I had those thoughts, then eventually I took an action, right? It resulted in some kind of behavior to fulfill the original need. And so I went to go, eat some food, and then that fulfilled the need. And then surprise, surprise, when I ate the food, then that need went away. And oftentimes, not only did that hunger, that feeling go away, but it got replaced with this nice satisfaction feeling, right? This nice happy feeling of like, oh, I feel good. That was a good meal. I don't feel hungry anymore. I'm happy, right? Okay. Interestingly enough, when we have emotional needs, this can be a similar process, right? And so let's take as an example a need for connection, right? I want to be connected to someone around me, and so I have that need kind of like emotionally. And again, this is something that's silent. It's not something that I'm aware of. It's not something that I can detect. It's just something that happens over time. Another thing that I'll mention here is that with needs, right, it's not like it happens right at 1 second. It just like slowly builds over time. So going back to hunger, it's not like, oh, I wasn't hungry at 12:01, but then 12:02 I was hungry, right? It's just like, oh, it's kind of gets like slowly stronger and stronger. It's a very subtle thing. And then at some point, like I'm pretty aware of it, it's like, hey, like I really need to get some food. And if I don't, then it's going to get stronger and stronger. Like it's going to continue to be like, hey, this is important. You need to take care of this. Okay. So going back to the example is, let's say I have a need for connection with somebody else, right? And so that's something I'm not consciously aware of, but it might give me this feeling, right? So at some point I might be like, hey, like I'm feeling kind of lonely, or I might be feeling just kind of sad, right? Or something like that. I might have something come up, and it's just a kind of feeling. But when we grew up, we're taught pretty quickly how to identify and kind of handle physical feelings like hunger. But sometimes with emotional feelings, we're not that clear on what they are. So you're just like, hey, I'm just sad, right? Like I don't really know why. I don't really know what's going on. All I know is I'm just kind of feeling sad. Maybe we have some awareness that I'm feeling lonely. So there's this kind of like a color to it. It's like, hey, like I feel like other people are having fun and they're talking and I'm not, and I'm kind of just like standing here by myself, or I'm sitting here by myself, and that's kind of not so fun, right? And so even already you're kind of seeing that this feeling of loneliness is kind of manifesting itself in the form of thoughts, right? And so I'm looking at other people and I'm saying like, hey, everybody's talking about me, right? Like I'm kind of just over here by myself. This is kind of sad, right? Like I don't have friends. So these are all thoughts that are being generated by this feeling of loneliness, right? Which has its root in a need for connection. I want to connect with other people, right? And so one thing that can happen is I can notice these thoughts and say, hey, like I want to take a behavior that's going to help me fulfill this need, right? So maybe I phone a friend and I go, hey, can you just talk to me for, 20 minutes or so? I just feel like I need to, talk and just, you know, hear somebody's voice, right? Someone familiar. And they might say, like, yeah, sure, let's get on the phone, let's talk. And maybe after that, I feel a lot better, And so now I feel like, oh, okay, like, I don't feel as lonely anymore. It's like I just had a good talk with my friend. And I feel like I could get some things off my chest and he understands where I'm coming from. And so now I don't feel like that anymore, right? But sometimes we take behaviors that actually are not fulfilling the need, right? So maybe I go, hey, like this is really sad. Like I don't want to be in front of all these people where everybody's hanging out except me. Let me just go home, right? And then I go home, and I'm by myself in my room or whatever it is, but I'm still not having that need for connection met, right? It's just that thing that was kind of reminding me that I'm lonely is not in front of me anymore, and so I still kind of don't feel that much better, right? And so this feeling is still kind of there. And this is kind of like if I didn't eat, right? Like I knew I was hungry, but I didn't eat. And so now it's just kind of getting stronger. And so this is really what, we want to talk about at Seek and Find Life a lot. This is just kind of a basic presentation of how this works is, hey, needs, manifest themselves to us. They're made aware to us in the form of feelings. And then these feelings kind of transform themselves into thoughts. And then these thoughts can turn into conscious behaviors. But these conscious behaviors do not necessarily meet the original need. It depends on how well we identify the need and make a decision to fulfill the need and have strategies available to us in order to fulfill the need. And so that's just kind of the flow, right? Is the need moves to a feeling that indicates to us what the need is, right? The feelings manifest themselves to us as thoughts. And then when we have these thoughts, we make a conscious decision on what to do. And that decision on what to do, that behavior either may fulfill or not fulfill the need. And that's basically it. So this is just, again, kind of a starter video to give a top-down view of the needs framework. We're going to be talking more and more about this framework as time goes on. We're also going to be talking about, hey, what are all the different things that can maybe not, I wouldn't say go wrong, but the ways that this gets disconnected, right? Is that, hey, we misinterpreted the feeling. Hey, we took a behavior that didn't fulfill the need. What's the result of that? And all these kinds of different things. But again, this is just our first video to give an introduction to the needs framework. Hopefully this is clear and gives you a basic idea of how needs are connected to feelings. Feelings are connected to thoughts, and thoughts are connected to behaviors. As always, we love feedback, so feel free to comment on this video or email me if you have any comments or questions or concerns or you weren't clear on something in the video. And I hope to see you for our next video in our fundamental concept series.